Hello everyone. I just wanted to go through pretty much how you would go about making a coin inside of Maya 2019. Alright, so when I usually start out a project, the first thing I do is if you're a beginner, you want to just kind of learn the interface. So you want to move around, understand where everything is. You want to scroll through the toolbars to see what the software that you're using really has. So if we just jump right in. I make an image plane to place the reference onto. So I just scroll to wherever my reference location is, and I will be able to provide this folder for you guys so that you can kind of follow along in the different stages. So you'll have the references that I have in here, and I have 3 different references, but I ultimately pick the one with the nice ridges because it's really clean, really nice, really nice quality image. So yeah, I picked that image just because it's such a high quality image, and then you just open it up and then it's placed in the scene. So the grid is showing right now, and what you want to do to get rid of that grid is you're gonna want to head to the view tab, and is it the view tab? I think it's the show tab. Yeah, it's the show tab, and then you just remove that grid. It's at the bottom right there. So now there's no more grid for you to have to work with, so you're pretty much good to go. The first thing you also want to do is, if you can freeze this so that whenever you don't you can't move it around or whatever, but you don't necessarily have to. It's good practice too, so that you're not messing with the reference image and moving it around and stuff like that. So after that, the first thing you want to do is go ahead and create a cylinder. And if you hit W and E and R, those are your free transforms, and one of them handles movement, rotation, and scale. So those are hotkeys that you should definitely learn. You should definitely know those because those are going to be very important. So what I did is I didn't want to free transform scale it, so I went into the attributes, and I started increasing the radius to something that was appropriate. And you can switch back and forth from the different views that you are allowed inside of Maya. So you can split the screen, you can have the 4 quadrants, and then if you hit spacebar on any of those, it'll take you back into whatever view you're currently selected in. So that's definitely something that you should start using and practicing and getting better at. So what happened there is I made the shaded view X-ray. So I hit the number 4 on my keypad, and that turns it into just a wireframe, so you can see through after I made my extra edge there. So what I'm doing now is just adding extra edges so that I have geometry to push down to make the inside bevel of that coin there. So you see that little lip there, so I'm drawing a circle that reaches those edges. And what I'm going to then do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to extrude it down, just pull it down so that I have a nice bevel inside of it. So, what's good about Maya is you can go back into the original shape attributes and change the scale if it isn't what it looked like, if it isn't right. So I switch back and forth from the front view and the perspective view to get, a better understanding of what's going on. And for game assets, it's important to know that a lot of this stuff is going to be flat, and you're going to be relying a lot on 3D and normals to get that detail across. So that's something you got to take into consideration for a movie, all the edges, all the lettering we're gonna do, that would be fine because you want the camera to catch all of that detail. But when it comes to video games, you really don't want that. That's a lot of geometry, a lot of useless geometry for a coin, which would usually be a very small asset in the game anyway. So, you know, oftentimes it would probably even be flat, you know. That's something you have to think about when you are making your assets. So yeah, let's jump back into this and let me tell you what's going on, which is now I'm just, you know, adding more edge loops so that I have enough to kind of push that edge down a little bit and give me that lip that I want. And I'm only gonna do this to one side because at the end of this, I'm just going to symmetry it. I'm going to add a symmetry modifier to this, and I won't have to do the other side by hand, saving me a lot of time and effort. So what we're making right now is the base of this coin, and we're going to add some detail. We're going to sculpt the face of the guy in the middle there. We're going to sculpt his face inside of ZBrush. All right. All right, so I start to check the, you know, edge width of this. So I wanted to put it at 0.5 just so I have something decent sized. The thing is, if you're making it for TV and film, like I said, you want to add all the details here. You want to make it as accurate as possible. But for video games, you're going to want to add a little more finesse to it so that when the lighting hits it, you get nice rim lighting. It looks good. You're getting edge detail. You're getting edge lighting and things like that that make assets look better with normal maps rather than having to rely on having actual geometry in the scene. So yeah, I'm just pulling it out to get a better view of what I'm working with. It's, you know, it's a simple, pretty simple, straightforward process. So if you hit 1, 2, and 3 on your keyboards, that will take you through the modes of your subdivisions. So 1 is like the base subdivision, 2 is second, and 3 is the third subdivision. So now I'm just selecting all the pieces in there, and usually if you have an extra ring, you can double shift it, hit shift twice, tap shift twice, and it'll ring the entire selection for you. So yeah, I'm just giving it a little bit of a push in there to get that shape right. So there's something called locking loops, and that's what I'm adding right now. So locking loops allow my edges to crease harder, so you're gonna have a harder transition from one edge to another. So, and that's what those green lines are, and if you you can either slide them or pinch them. So if you pinch them, it'll flare it out on a scale from 0 to 1. So the 1 would be closer to the edge and 0 would be closer to the center. So, and I do that for all the edges so that whenever I hit that 1, 2, or 3 on the subdivision, you're going to get hard edges whenever it smooths. Yeah, I'm just trying to find the right number to make the edge closer to, as close to that edge as I possibly can without making it too sharp. So now I'm just hitting that 1, 2, and 3, like I said, to toggle between the subdivision modes, which is smoothing out the shape. So let's get this out of here. So now that we've finally made our first base shape, it looks good enough to me right now. We've got a nice bevel, so you can see that little distance right there, and that'll catch very nicely in the normal map. You don't want to make anything too thin because normal maps have a tendency to become wavy when lines are too thin or you have a 90-degree angle on objects. So those are really hard to compute for normal maps because they love 45-degree angles, because that's the most optimum angle for them to catch the light. So now it's time to make the text. The text is just, you go up to the taskbar, hit that T, and it'll bring up a text editing 3D aspect of it. And you can just type your text in, then change the font to Times New Roman, and then scale it down. And what I do next is I just try to grab the text using the selection menu and hitting W to bring up your moving widget, and you just want to kind of make it match as close as possible to the S, and that's my point of reference. And point of references are good because it helps me know that my shape is accurate to the original one. So here it is. So I'm just matching it as close as I possibly can, because what I'm going to do eventually is add a bend modifier to it so that it bends it in that arc that you see over George Washington's head. And once you kind of understand how the text works, and you understand how to use your little modifiers to affect change on your 3D objects, you'll understand how it works for all of them. And I use that same process pretty much on all the other lettering on the text as well. So I'm just reducing the extrusion, and the extrusion gives you a lot of different profile shapes, and those profile shapes make the curve that you're getting on those bevels look different, and it'll make the shape that you're getting on the extrude look different. So you can play around with those whenever you get a chance. I would go through, click them to see what they do and what the step one does, what the little wavy one does, just so you get familiar with all the tools that you have at your disposal. So now I'm just making sure that it's thick enough that I can add a bevel and it won't destroy my geometry. So I think I accidentally hit the smooth button and I went back because the reason that it looks that ugly whenever it's smooth is because all of those faces aren't triangulated. They aren't meeting another point, so there's nowhere for them to smooth into. There's no transition for that line, and when that line stops, it's just an open face. So when you smooth it out, it's just going to collapse in on itself. So to get something smooth on the edges like the coin has, you're gonna have to add a bevel to it, and that bevel profile adds a bit of softness to the edges, so it's not as sharp. This will also aid in the creation of the normal map. So always remember to save your work. Don't sleep on that, because Autodesk products have been known to crash unexpectedly. So I save, and I save often. Don't forget to. All right. So, I'm just going through and adding this little bevel to it, and like I said before, the bevel profile has those pre-made graphs for you to kind of affect it, and you can use the sliders, but I find it often more accurate to just type in the values that I want to use, and when I type in the values, I can hone in on whatever I want that value to be. So I just type in a 0.01 and for the bevel distance, and 0.01 as well for the bevel offset. And that'll give you a decent bevel on it, so it's smooth all the way around, and you don't have to worry about it looking super sharp on the baking side. So with that, I'm just going to then start looking to bend my United States lettering. So if you add the bend modifier in the deform panel, if you just start deforming it, it's not going to work properly. What you need to do is to turn it. So grab the rotation widget and rotate it 90 degrees. And whenever you do that and you start messing with the curvature, then you're going to start getting your bend. Then you're going to start seeing the curve the way it is. And then you can I would start going into all of the attributes and start playing with the envelope and the curvature and seeing the results you get. And it's important for you to try to, get it as close as you can, but this isn't about, counterfeiting money. So do your best with, keeping it close and making it uniform. So I didn't think the size of the text was small enough, so I wouldn't try to reduce it to get something more accurate, something closer to it. And you can definitely go through and, you know, mess with it as close as you can to get it to the closest that you can. And even at the end, you know, I go back and I hand place some of the text myself so that I have it to be more accurate and everything falls in the right place. Because, you know, the mechanical way is only going to get you so far. So, you know, and in all honesty, you have to compensate for some of either the distortion or any of the, you know, because if it's a picture that it's used in the reference, you're gonna have to account for the camera, you know, FOV and everything like that as well. So yeah, on that note, just trying to get that bend to work properly and make it look right is the most important part. So definitely take your time with this part, and switch back and forth from your orthographic views back to your perspective views as well. So I'm just going through now and just making some more of this text, and you know, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Once you made the first one, you'll understand, okay, I just need to pull this out, you know, reduce the extrusion amount to like 0.5 or something like that, center my text for this, you know, just use your best judgment. And if you want, you can even have fun with whatever you put there, as long as it's appropriate. So you can also mess with the leading and the kerning of your text. If you don't know what that is, that's the space between your text and the space between the lettering, and that affects how your text looks. So you can definitely mess with that to get the best looking text as well, to get the most out of it. And with this In God We Trust, I ended up just, you know, making the text and the bevel and adding everything to it. And then after the fact, I went ahead and moved all those pieces because they're a little off from the reference. So that's something I did by hand later on. So yeah, I just, you know, grab it, move it back, mess with my edge distance, my extrusion distance to make sure it's something reasonable. And then turn on my my bevel profile, and as usual, I can just dial in those same numbers, those same values that we used for the other one, because we know they work already. And I don't have to mess with the slider, because depending on the scale of your object, the slider can be very inaccurate. So I would stick to just typing it in, you know, getting used to that dialog box. So continuing with the text, just making the Liberty text now. Like I said, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, this is pretty much the easy part of it. The more technical, more fun part would be the sculpting inside of ZBrush, and that's going to be fun. That's going to be, you know, you get to go a little artistically crazy. You can make the sculpt of whatever you want, or you can make it a goblin or whatever, and, you know, be fine. It doesn't have to be George Washington. This is just me showing you the concept of what we're going to do. You know, and it'll take you through all the processes of understanding how Objects are used for movies, objects are used for games, and creating these assets and getting them ready for rendering and texturing and just the entire process. So just moving the Liberty text to its position, and then adjusting the kerning and the leading of the object itself so that it's more accurate. And I'm switching back and forth from my front view just so I make sure it's correct, to make sure everything looks right. And as you can see, it is really off, and that's partly because of the font, and that's something that you guys are more than welcome to try. If you find another font that is that font, you're more than welcome to use that, but I use Times New Roman just because it's the closest sans serif that I could find that was in Times New Roman. So, and it's free, so chances are you're not going to be able to find the exact text that it's on money, but you might be able to find something closer, and you install it, and I'm pretty sure that Maya will just automatically upload it into your text library. So just install it if you find it, and that would be cool. And you can even have fun with the font as well, and pick a different font, pick a different, make your own coin, make you a coin of your face, whatever you have to do to make it fun. These are just teaching you the basic concepts of how these objects go from start to finish. So yeah, it was bold, but I decided I liked it better regular, so that's what that is. Going back, and then now just same process, going through, adding the bevel, adding the edge to it, using that same profile that I have been using. Just pull it out, and making sure it looks flat and it's flush with the other ones and they look good together. So an asset like this, I just want to reiterate that this would not be a game ready asset. This isn't a game asset. This is your high poly model. This is the model that you can use for productions. This is the model that you can use if you're going to make it into like a poster or an advertisement or something along those lines. If you're making the quarter for a TV commercial and they want a close-up of a quarter, flipping, you would use something like this. But for a video game, you would never want to use something like this, because you'd be spending a lot of your polygons, because as you can see, there's a lot of edges to this. There's a lot of line, like all those add up to computing power that your game engines don't really have right now. There's only a max count of polygons that they can allow before your system starts to bog down, and your consoles can only handle so much. So you're left with going into these kind of rendering tricks to make your games look really good. And in the industry's defense, computers are getting faster, your processors are getting better, your graphic cards are getting better, your monitors are getting better, so we're exponentially getting better, but the standards for film are a lot different than the standards for video games. So this is this is high poly stuff that we're going to be working on. By the time we get into ZBrush, start sculpting, adding the, you'll see how big, a mesh can get, and why it can't be used in game engines. So I'm just gonna start making the last little bit of the text, which is the $quarter, and I'm just gonna use the same process that I used to make the United States of America part of it. And I'm just gonna drag it down there. Start with the extrusion process, you know, and what I can do is I can grab the parameters that I use so I don't have to remember them, because, you know, who wants to have to do that when you can just copy and paste it, or just, you know, go back to it and just look at it real quick so you know what you did. So I'm just going to speed up this process a little bit just so you can get to the end of it, and, you know, add that bend modifier, and that's pretty much going to be it for this part. It was a little long just because I had to get through just the basics, and hopefully you guys can get a good understanding of what it takes to make these assets. You know, just take your time with it, tweak it, mess it up a few times. It's okay to fail, it's okay to mess it up, you know. Doesn't have to be perfect the first time, but, you know, definitely work at it and definitely try to get the most out of this little introductory model. All right, I look forward to seeing you guys on the next chapter, which is going to be inside of ZBrush, where we start to sculpt our head that we'll use for the center of our coin. All right. Also, to kind of wrap it up, I did go ahead and model the back. I did a symmetry modifier on the coin itself, and that flipped the object around, and all you have to do is change it from the X to the Y, and it will flip itself around, and you'll have a duplicate of one side to the other. Make sure it's merged so that all the vertices in the middle are welded together. On that note, I'm gonna save this and get out of here. All right, cool.